Hello and welcome to another episode of FireDEV, a fireside chat with developers. So today I've got Nathanael Weiss here, and he's the creator of Songbringer and the CEO and founder of WizardFu. So I'll let him do the rest of the introduction. I'm sure he can do a better one than me.
Yes, hello. I'm Nathaniel, and make video games. And currently, I'm making a video game called Wraithbinder, which is part of the Songbringer universe, and it's a multiplayer roguelike with Metroidvania elements.
Okay. And obviously, you're making this game. Let's touch on the original game a bit more before we talk about this one, Songbringer. How did that all come about? Because the first time I was introduced to it was a fair few years back when you hadn't even launched the game yet. And I came across your live streams on YouTube. And I remember seeing them, and they were like 1, 2, 3, or so hours long. It wasn't like a 2, 3 minute video. It was actual live streams where you're doing code, and I remember seeing it towards the start and then not seeing it for a little while and then seeing it and thinking you've progressed so much. So so how did that all come about? The game and then the live streaming and all that stuff.
Well, it started with a state of being, and that state of being or mind was one where I was thinking, what kind of game would I make if it were the last video game I could ever make in my entire life? And I thought, well, it took me a while to figure out, but I was really inspired by the original Legend of Zelda and how fun it was, how much exploration I felt there, and how just allowed you to do whatever you wanted without any kind of tutorial whatsoever. And I wanted to create that, but with procedurally generated worlds. So my whole goal for Songbringer was to create a game that had a story and dungeons and an overworld, but all of that was randomly generated so that you could play a different world every time you played it. And that's how Songbringer came about. And it eventually turned into a Kickstarter project, which succeeded. And also found a publisher to help me get it on Xbox and PlayStation and Nintendo Switch and even iOS in the end. And that's kind of the story of Songbringer.
Okay. And the procedural nature of the game, how did you find that compared to just creating levels and just having obviously a fixed layout and you know what's happening and you know what the end user is gonna see and like the rough experience.
Well, it was quite a technical challenge. First of all, to create the procedural generated maps and dungeons, and both of those are different technologies. The overworld
Mhm.
itself is this maze generated with a maze within that maze, and then the real technical part of it all was having to make sure it worked correctly. There's 4 billion possible worlds in Songbringer, and you have to make sure that in every one of those, the player can complete it. So I have all these technologies which actually generates all the maps, make sure they're all completable, and there's a lot of technicality that goes into all of it. It probably took an extra, I imagine, a year to year and a half of development time just adding that whole procedurally generated world combined with the bespoke elements of a story and plot elements and things like that.
Okay. And during the process of the procedural aspect of the game, did you ever generate levels during testing where you just felt that those particular iterations just weren't that good as a different generated one from that particular version?
No, my mindset was to take the ones that weren't that good and figure out why, and
Okay.
fix that in the generator each time. So I'm a very iterative developer. I look at things and play them and go, what's wrong with this? How can I improve this? Where does this need work? And I just iterate and improve until it is fun.
Okay. And how many would you say that? Because obviously, there's no way you would have tested all 4 billion or so possibilities yourself. How many do you think you've tested and played yourself? And
Uh,
I'm guessing you have some favorites as well?
there's two or three that I've really played really well, and my favorite is one called Wizard. So yeah, you give it when you start playing Songbringer, you give it a 6-letter world seed, and that world seed is basically just turned into a number, which is your random number generator seed. So your entire world is based on your 6-letter word you give it at the beginning. And my favorite world is wizard.
Was it? And is that lowercase or uppercase, or does it not matter?
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Okay. So for anyone listening, check out that particular level wizard. Okay.
Yeah, there's a whole PDF document produced about that world in particular, which has maps of
Okay.
the entire world and the locations of all the items.
Yeah. And how do you handle, because obviously it's procedurally generated, how do you handle, story aspects, story elements? Because, you get games like Uncharted that are very, do this, do that. You go to this part and they have a very story driven element to them. But obviously I know you've got a story element to your game. How do you handle that when it's not so fixed and you don't know what's gonna, come up?
It's all just looking at where the player is in the world and allowing that to happen when a certain thing happens that they do, or whenever you allow the player to trigger it. So,
Yeah.
for example, there's some story elements that trigger if you get lost at the beginning. So
Hmm.
you're wandering around a little bit. If you haven't found the first dungeon after a while, a story element happens where you find this thing called the biodetector, and this is a little sort of like a little drone that you can launch into the air, which detects where the first dungeon is. So my whole goal for it was to make it so it didn't hold your hand at whatsoever, but still there's places where a player will need help, and so that's the one way of providing that help and allowing the player to help themselves in a way, because you have to pick up the biodetector and use it in order to actually find the first dungeon if you haven't found it already. And that allows that gives the choice to the player. It doesn't force the player to complete some tutorial. It allows them to choose whether they want to, how they want to proceed.
Yeah. Okay. And the story itself, is it fixed regardless of the level that gets generated? Or are there some elements that do get sort of tweaked dynamically, but then you have the overarching story the same? How does that work?
Yeah, so that's the one part of the of Songbringer that's completely bespoke. All of the story elements are the same, and they're just peppered throughout the world in different places depending on your world
Hmm.
scene. And there is one thing that's unique, and that's just that there's multiple endings. They're both pretty much the same ending, but they just end slightly differently. So there's two
Okay.
different endings. But other than that, the entire story is a bespoke thing.
It's a bespoke thing. Okay, that's pretty cool. And do you have some sort of system where you track what levels have been generated, like half of them have been generated, for example, and do you have a system of tracking popular ones, for example, ones that people keep generating again and again?
That's a great question. I can't remember if I did that or not. I know I added some stats that get tracked, like what worlds are generated or how many people have completed the first dungeon. I can't remember if I did one for how many for what dungeons are more popular.
Hmm. Okay, fair enough. And you mentioned that you had a Kickstarter for Songbringer. It almost doubled its funding goal. The goal wasn't, crazy, anything like 100,000 or a million. So where did that roughly? I think was it 15,000 US dollars. Where did that roughly? What did that help you do?
That helped me get the ball rolling, really. The whole reason I did the Kickstarter, and I wrote an entire article on this on Gama Sutra, which I think is called GameDeveloper.com now. But anyways, the article was all about how to prove whether your game is worth your time. And I had been through a project before Songbringer where I spent nearly 2 years working with a friend, so two developers working on a video game, which was a complete flop. Nobody played it in the end, and it was a very disheartening experience. And I wanted to prevent that in the future. I thought, what can I do to prove whether my game is worth my time? I don't want to sink another 2 years of my life into something and not have it succeed whatsoever. So how can I create some indicators of success before I spend all that time? And I thought Kickstarter is the perfect way to do that. you're getting people to not only say, "Yes, I'm interested in your video game, but I'm willing to pay some money for it right now," which is
Yeah.
the ultimate way for someone to say, yeah, to commit to something. So I thought Kickstarter was an excellent idea, and it turned out to be a very successful project. It was quite a lot of work to launch a Kickstarter and run a Kickstarter. It took probably 80-90% of my time was spent just on campaigning and marketing and
Hmm.
things like that. So no, almost no development was done during the Kickstarter, but it enabled everything else. It got the lots of press attention for Songbringer. It created an additional fan base, and it also eventually led me to my publisher, which I love them. They're awesome, and they're amazing people. So all around, quite a success.
Okay. And how long? Because you said during the Kickstarter process you wasn't really doing much development. How long was that Kickstarter process from start to I guess finish?
It was 1 month.
It was a month. Okay. And would you do it again? Yeah, and for what would be the reasoning for yes or no?
Yes, of course. And once again, to prove whether a game is worth my
Hmm.
time, I would do
Okay.
that. That said, with Wraithbinder, I feel that this is already a project that has people, enough interest in it. So it's not something that I feel that a Kickstarter is necessary. And in fact, I feel it would take a lot of time to do a Kickstarter. Like I said, it takes
Yeah.
that much marketing time. So um, Wraithbinder is already funded and already doing well, already has a fan base. So um, I guess it depends on the game, right? It depends on the game and where you are as a developer, whether a
Hmm.
Kickstarter is something that would be beneficial.
Okay. And what sort of input did the publisher have with Songbringer, and what sort of input are they having with Wraithbinder? What's the difference between the two games, the input that they're having?
Uh, Songbringer, they provided a lot of input on the game's design. They actually had a designer working with me, and what's really great about my publisher is that they really allow me to have um, just like a all full creative reign. They allow me to make the game how I want it, which is something that I wouldn't engage in a relationship with a publisher if they didn't, because that was kind of one of my biggest things when I started Songbringer. Is like I want to follow my heart on this video game. I want to do exactly what I want to do. And thankfully, Double 11 has allowed me to do exactly that. They've allowed me to follow my heart with these video games and create them. But they've also provided some input here and there. And for example, with Songbringer, they provided this designer to help out along the way, and he helped amazingly. His name's Tom Pedalino. He's a great guy, and he's won some awards for his game designs. And he provided tons of input along the way and helped coordinate so much of the game's play testing and all sorts of aspects of Songbringer. So a lot of thanks to him. And also with Wraithbinder, they one key input they provided is, why don't we make this one let's elevate what you did with Songbringer, and why not make this one multiplayer? So, or at least add some multiplayer elements. So that's some big input they provided there with this latest game.
Okay. And how did you come about, you know, the relationship with Double 11? Did you just reach out to them, or did they reach out to you? Was this through some sort of mutual contact? And did you reach out to or speak to other publishers as well?
Actually, they reached out to me during the Kickstarter
Okay.
and said basically, "Hey, if your Kickstarter doesn't succeed, talk to us. Give us a call because we think you're an amazing person. You're a solo developer creating a video game, and you're not only are you a programmer, but you're an artist and a musician as well. That's kind of a rare thing, and we'd love to work with you if your Kickstarter fails." And the Kickstarter succeeded, and I told them thanks, but we got it for now. But then basically, Kickstarter, the funds were enough for a few months to continue, but I got to the point where I really wanted to continue with Songbringer even further than my original kind of vision was for, and so I contacted them, and we established a relationship at that point, And from then on, I'm like, these guys are awesome. I really want to work with them continually. So yeah, a great relationship and an awesome find, and forever thankful for that Kickstarter for finding them.
Okay. And during the creation of Songbringer, did you have like a regular day job? Like, how did you support yourself? And that same question now during the creation of Wraithbinder, because I know that's a lot. That's a big issue that indies have, is that you got to pay the bills, you got to put food on the table, even if it's only you, you got to eat. So, like, how did you manage that?
I have never had a job working for my video games. I have my own company. It's called WizardFu, and I've formed that years ago. And I've only worked for that company making my own video games. And I would recommend, I don't think it would be possible for me to make a video game while also having a day job. It would take far too much time away from the video game. Um, as it stands, I currently work 14-hour days, 5 days a week, and so that's about 70 hours a week. I work on Wraithbinder, and for Songbringer, it was more like 7 days a week, which I do not recommend at all, and I'll never ever repeat. 7 days a week is just far too much, and it's so easy to create burnout in a game developer. But those are the kinds of numbers. That's how much time I'm spending on my video games right now. And so there's no way a day job would be possible for doing that. So if there's other developers out there right now that are looking to make video games, I would say find a way to um, to make your video games full time, but don't spend your own money. Find a way to do it with like Kickstarter, or find a publisher, or something else where you're just not spending your own money or your own
Mhm.
savings, because that's also a way that's too risky in life. You need to prove that your game is worth your time, and that's a great way to do that, is like to have other people invest in you. So there's some advice there.
Okay. And feel free to refuse to answer that, but I have to ask, how much did you make from Songbringer?
Oh, well, I could tell you how much I personally made off of
Okay.
Songbringer, but I can't tell you what my publisher made.
Of course.
Um, yeah, I think Songbringer. The last I checked, it probably made about 50,000 dollars. Which, if you do all the math on how long I actually worked, it turns out that I made less than minimum wage writing Songbringer. It took me about 3.5 years of life to make this video game, and working 7 days a week, at least 12 hours a day. And so you do all that math, and that turns out that it really didn't make very much at all. However, it's a success. It's actually made. It's if you look at the top video games on Steam, originally, sorry, I did some math the other day, or I read an article about this, and something like um, 90% of video games on Steam don't even make like $10,000 or something like that.
Hmm.
So just for a game to even make $100,000 is a significant thing. And not only that, but it enabled me to make the next video game. It found a publisher. It was a successful Kickstarter. All around, it was quite a successful video game. It's just that it's more difficult than you would imagine to make a really good living making video games. I hope for my next video game, Wraithbinder, though, that it will make a really good income, and will make my publisher a profit and make me enough profit to actually live well. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I hope it does, because I remember when I played Songbringer. I mean, the one of the things that stood out to me was just how good the game was, and considering it was made by one person, yourself. And I mean, this sort of goes on to like a question I was going to ask you a little later, but I'll ask you now. It's like, how did you manage, doing all of it yourself? Because you did the coding, you did the art, you did the audio. Very rarely do you get somebody that does all three, commits all three to a project, and is actually good at all three. Because if you look at Songbringer, the coding is clearly, great. I mean, you've got live stream, so you can actually see it. The artwork is great, that pixelated artwork, and the animation. I like the small little animations that you've got in the game. Like, when the characters, just even when he's standing still, he's got a bit of movement going, and there's a bit of movement or spot. It's just stuff happening. and that just brings the world alive. And then the audio's fantastic as well. So how did it all evolve to you getting to the stage where you could actually do all three stages, and what made you do all three instead of just focusing on one and either partnering or hiring somebody to do the other two?
Yeah. So I've always had this dream of being a developer that could do all those things. Um, when I originally started making video games, actually in the 1990s, I was only programming. So one of my first video games, I actually hired out someone to do the music for it, and I made some pretty cheesy pixel art for it. This is all back in the DOS days, so before Windows, making games in MS DOS. Um, and yeah, it was a dream of mine to make music as well, and also to be able to make good art. So gosh, fast forward 10 years later, and I started making music. I spent an entire decade actually not I stopped making video games and only made music for a long time, and kind of pursued the dream of perhaps being a musician in life. And then the iOS explosion happened where we had iPhones, and kind of got back into making video games again. And at that point, I realized the only thing that's stopping me from being this truly multi-talented game developer was having really good art skills. So I started just focusing on. I bought a little tablet, a Wacom tablet, and I started using the pen and focusing on making pixel art and created scenes and artwork and animations and focus on other artists and looking at their tutorials online on YouTube and things like that. And a few years later, I had felt that I developed some good pixel art skills, and that's how it all kind of happened with me becoming this multi-talented game developer. It just took a lot of time. It took years. Um, I would say programming was my original knack. I don't know what it was, but when I was a teenager in high school, I just picked up programming rather quickly, and maybe I was just young enough at that point that all those concepts of the C language and pointers and all that just kind of made sense to me at that point. And now I'm at the point where I can do all those things, and so it's like why not do them all? And also I had just, had a game where it didn't succeed with someone else, and I thought it'd just be a lot easier just to manage only myself for the next project, and sort of like take out the time that it's necessary when you're working with other people. There's an amount of time you have to put into just communication, like communicating your ideas for the video game together, whether you have an idea or your partner has an idea or your partners have ideas. There's a lot of time that actually goes into just communicating those ideas, fleshing them out, and talking about them, and sort of like voting on them. And so I thought that it would save a ton of time if I didn't have to do that. And it turns out that that's kind of the truth. When you're a solo developer, there's a lot of time that's saved in that sort of round table discussion that happens with making video games with other people.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because when you're like you're saying, when you're having to communicate, um, partly you got time constraints, so they might be busy at a certain time. You may be free, and vice versa. Then you've got the issue of, are they even understanding what you're saying? And if you've agreed to do something, are each of you understanding what each of you said, or are you just going to go off, work on it for a few days, and come back and realize you was just totally off the ball? So yeah, I mean that's definitely one of the issues when working with people. So just circling back, when you were talking about the money you made from the game Songbringer, what was the sort of split between the different platforms? Like, what platforms were more popular, or was it a pretty even split?
They're pretty even.
Pretty even. Okay. And what's your favorite device to play the game on, personally?
I prefer Nintendo Switch.
Okay, because that's probably, is that the latest port or one of the latest ports?
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to developing, I prefer the PC.
Yeah, yeah.
It's much faster and all that. And in fact, I do some of my favorite runs of Songbringer have been on the PC. But in the end, right now, I play video games mostly on the Switch when I can, because I have a console and a nice chair and a TV and all that set up. So it's a lot more of a comfortable experience.
Yeah, of course. And a light question: how often do you play video games right now?
At least every week, I'm on, especially on the weekends, I'll be able to play some video games. And yeah, I'm playing a lot of Switch games right now. And yeah, that's where I spend some of my fun time.
Okay. What are your current go-to games on the Switch?
I played Hades a lot, and Curse of the Dead Gods, and Scourgebringer, and I just got City Skylines. Zelda Breath of the Wild is one of my favorite video games ever. Yeah, I tried. I tried. I love the Metroid series, and I've gotten stuck on Metroid Dread a couple times already. I've got stuck on the first boss. I feel crazy. I'm like, what? Why? I used to be able to speed run Super Metroid, back before speed running Super Metroid was a thing, and now I can't even beat the first boss in Metroid Dread. It's like, what's going on?
Yeah, I need to get back to playing that. I remember I bought that, played it a little bit, and then I stopped. Yeah, I need to get back to playing that. And are there any games you're looking forward to in the future?
Oh yeah, of course. The new Silk Song I can't wait for. I love the Hollow Knight series and all those games. Or sorry, this is just one game, but of course, the new Breath of the Wild game. I forget the name of
Yeah.
it, but they just announced it. And yeah, I mean, I love video games. I love celebrating the success of other developers. I cherish video games. They're amazing creations. It's interactive form of entertainment that can.
Oh yeah.
It's a powerful thing.
Oh yeah, it is. I can kind of guess the answer, but I'm guessing video games are your favorite form of medium or media, I should say.
I wouldn't go so far to say that. I'd say that there's several forms of media that hold equal share in my heart, you could say. I love music just as much as I love video games.
Okay. And the Songbringer, it was ported over to many consoles and many platforms. You worked on the PC version. Did you work on any other versions other than the PC version?
Yeah, I worked on the iOS version as well. So basically, Double Eleven took my code and ported it to Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo Switch. However, I did all the coding and everything for the PC versions and the iOS version.
Okay. And you was using Cocos 2DX, wasn't you, for the PC and iOS version? Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay. And Double Eleven, did they? Well, what did they use when they ported it over to the other platforms?
they have their own proprietary engine. So they wrote a tiny little layer which basically emulated Coco's 2DX. And that made it pretty easy to port Songbringer over and keep the port alive. So basically, I could keep developing my side of things, and they could develop their part. And there's just a little layer in between that allowed us to communicate, basically.
Okay. And did you get an advance of for the port, or was it on the basis that on a revenue share basis?
I'm not sure I can discuss that on the
Okay,
podcast.
that's fair enough. Are you still using Cocos 2DX for Wraithbinder, and why did you originally choose to use Cocos 2DX?
I'm currently at the point where I've almost phased Coco's 2DX out. However, I'm still basically using it. Um, there's a tiny layer of it left, which is allowing me to run the game on Windows and on
Mhm.
Linux, or sorry, on Mac and Linux. However, on Windows, Wraithbinder is completely using um, the Double 11 engine. So I'm just about there where I can kind of like completely phase out Coco's 2DX, but they're still just barely using their renderer. Um, and this is from a very old branch of their code, the 3.9 version. I think that was like a 2000. 16 or something like that. It's a very, very old version of Cocos 2DX, and it's just a branch that I used then. And I tried upgrading it at one point. I was like, let's at least try the new 4.0 version of Cocos 2DX, but I couldn't get it to run. There's a lot of things they change with each version of Cocos 2DX, so it kind of got locked in to this old version, and I just fixed whatever bugs were necessary in the Cocos 2DX code base, and now, yeah, I'm about to phase it out.
Okay. And why did you originally choose Cocos 2DX for Songbringer versus, I mean, so many other engines out there?
Well, first of all, it's C++ based, so
Yes.
that's the language I want to work in. And what's great about C++ is that it's pretty universal as far as video games go. For example, my publisher Double Eleven's proprietary engine is written in C++ as well, so it's a very portable language. You can pretty much write code with C++ and have it run on any platform. And Also, it's very fast. C++ is one of the fastest languages out there. And with Wraithbinder, actually, I figured out how to get it to compile just as fast as C. So I did a lot of tests when I first started writing Wraithbinder, and I was like, I really want to be able to compile my games as fast as I used to in the C days. Like, I wanted to be able to just have it, boom, compile in seconds. And I figured out how to do that with C++. As long as you don't use the standard template library, you can compile games just as fast as the C-based language.
Okay. And so why C++ and not JavaScript, for example, which is becoming really popular for development and even game development, especially when you got stuff like Cocos Creator and many other editors out there that are using JavaScript for inbuilt scripting.
Yeah, three reasons. One, portability. So
Hmm.
first of all, you're not going to be able to run your game in Java with JavaScript on all platforms. Secondly, speed, raw performance. C++, you can get really close to the actual hardware and create very fast video games. Java and JavaScript are very much slower in the sense that they can't get as much raw speed. And Thirdly, familiarity. I'm very familiar with C-based languages and not as familiar with Java. And there's huge gotchas when you don't understand a language fully. There's so much going on with memory management and everything involved in a language. So I'm very familiar with C, and so I understand it deeply. And switching to any other language would be very time-consuming thing for me to do, and it just would be like shooting myself in the foot as far as my programming goes.
Yeah, okay. And tell us about, EntityFu and RapidGame, because that's your creations.
Yeah, EntityFu is just an entity component system that I wrote during the Songbringer days. It's a C++ entity component system, and an entity component system is just something like if you've ever worked with Unity. um, Unity has entities, and it has components for all those entities. So an entity might have a position component where inside that position component it has the data about the entity's position inside the world. It might have a render component where it has information about how it renders itself in the world, what it looks like, whether it uses a 3D model or a 2D sprite, what the coordinates are there, the textures, and all those kinds of things. They'll all go in the render component. Then there's something like a collision component, which would have information on how big the entity is in the world, what type of shape it is, how it collides with the world, what happens with the friction, and other things like that. Um, so yeah, there's lots of sort of components which you can attach to an entity, and that's how an entity component system really works. So there's entities, which are basically amalgams of components. Components are simply just data, and systems are the things which run all those entities and components and allow them to interact with each other and create the life of the world, you could say.
Okay, and have you ever thought about creating your own engine from scratch?
Yeah, so basically, Wraithbinder, I pretty much, I kind of have in a sense. I started out to create this thing called KitFu, which is my own engine wrapper layer. Um, and that basically just allowed me to um, wrap up everything that Cocos 2DX does in my own wrapper layer. So instead of using Cocos 2DX code directly, I'm using my own code which interfaces with Cocos 2DX, which allows me to completely swap out a different engine. So that's how Wraithbinder currently runs with Cocos 2DX on Macs and with my publisher's proprietary engine on Windows and every other platform. So it's basically an engine agnostic layer. And it started out as just a layer, and now it's become almost its own engine in a sense. And so, yeah, at this point, I kind of have written my own engine with KitFu. The only thing it doesn't have is a renderer. And so, yeah, and eventually I'll probably uh, create some sort of maybe I'll make a renderer for it, and then it'll be a full engine, but maybe it'll just stay as it is with the as a wrapper layer.
Okay. And how did you cope with stuff like diet and health doing indie dev? And was it even something you struggled with? Because I know some people do, especially when you're working from home and you do your own stuff, your own games. You're working so many hours. You're not giving time for yourself to rest and to just physically and mentally recover.
Yeah, I think it's critical. It's something you should really focus on. Obviously, other developers don't focus on that as much. Um, for example, I know John Carmack used to just order pizzas every single day for it in software. But yeah, right now what I do is I actually prep all my meals. So on Sundays, I'll spend some time and prep 21 meals for the week, and I got some healthy breakfasts and lunches and dinners and all that, and I've got all that prepped so that I save a ton of time throughout my week, and I can just pop a meal into the oven and have it out in 10 minutes. And I even eat while I'm coding. So I'd save a lot, save some time that way throughout the week, and that's one thing that allows me to really get in those 70 hours of development right now. And I think it's critical to have a good, healthy eating and also exercise. So I do two very focused, intense weightlifting workouts per week right now, and those keep me in good physical shape. And also, I take half an hour breaks. So basically, I have this little app on my computer, which every half an hour it completely blacks out my screen, and I can't see what's going on at all. And that basically just forces me to get up, take a quick little break, and what I do is I climb up and down the stairs a few times to get my heart rate moving, and I'll do some other postural stretches and things like that. So 5 minutes. It takes me about 5 minutes every half an hour, and but that just keeps my blood moving, and that's one thing I learned throughout my many years of game development. It's very easy for the body to get um, injured and things like that, and it takes away a ton of your time uh, if you're not taking good care of your body. And I've had so many different knee injuries and wrist injuries and things like that, which all were related to just basically um, too much usage of or lack of usage of the body. So that's why I really focus on getting my heart rate up. You know, let's see, I do 14 hours, 14 to 17 work sessions. That's yeah, at least 14 times a day. I'm getting up and getting my blood moving. So it really, really helps the body and the mind. That's a critical part of game development is your mental health. And when your body's in good working order, it really helps your cognitive performance as well.
Okay, and you briefly mentioned that 2 days a week you do some, weight exercises. What does that involve, exactly? Because I'm into fitness, especially now over the last couple of years, and weightlifting. So I'm interested to hear, how that works for you.
Yeah, I basically just do resistance bands exercises, and that's only because I had lived in my van for the last 3 years. So I needed a way to do resistance exercises like weightlifting, but in a very small space. And I found that resistance bands were the thing that allowed me to do that, to be able to have weightlifted style training in a very small space. So I've continued to do that, and my goals are basically just to grow physically. I want to grow a bigger, more muscular body, and but also do that in as minimal amount of time as possible. So I used to be doing 3 to 5 workouts per week, and I found that I was not gaining any muscle at all. And so I finally switched to just doing 2 a week, and somehow I'm now gaining muscle. So it's like I finally realized that muscle building is just about it's just as important how much you work out as it is how much you rest. Your
Hmm.
muscles grow when you're resting, so if- it's weird, but only working out twice a week has allowed me to make much more progress than I ever did before trying to do too much work. So
Okay.
just working out and eating right is working for
Yeah.
me.
Okay. And would you say your workouts now, where you're doing it twice a week, are each more intense than they were when you were doing 3, 4 times a week, or are they just as intense that you've just reduced it to two?
Yeah, they're still just as intense. I used to work out very intensely 3 to 5 times per week, and now I'm working out very intensely just twice a week. So I spend about an hour to hour and 15 minutes doing very intense weightlifting, full body. So it's legs and arms and everything else, the entire body, and very intense to the point of like almost failure in every one of my sets and lifts. And they're what you call giant sets, where you basically just do your my entire workout is like 5 different lifts yeah, different exercises, and I do them all without any rest, and then I take a 2 minute rest break. So and then I repeat that 4 to 5 times.
Okay. And you touched on diet. Obviously, that's very important in general in life, but especially when you're exercising and trying to build muscle. And what does your diet look like right now? And what advice would you give to people that are trying to build muscle and just trying to have a healthier lifestyle, but while still maintaining energy?
Oh yeah. I'd say, it's important to have enough protein. I think that's kind of the first thing. You got to have. Uh, it depends on your body and your what your goals are and things like that. But for me, I found that about my body weight in pounds in grams of protein is pretty good. So I weigh about 150 pounds right now, and so I have at least 150 grams of protein per day, and I like to get that in various forms too. So um, I have some eggs, I have some chicken, I have some turkey and other types of sort of leaner meats like a white fish and things like that. And I find that I've been through different phases of my body development, and one of them was a phase where I was trying to get leaner, and this phase I'm currently in right now, I'm just trying to get stronger. And what's helped is that I know how to get leaner, and I also know how to get stronger. So combining those two is a really nice way to kind of stay somewhat lean, but also grow stronger. So basically, eating just barely more than necessary. So I know roughly amount how many calories my body needs right now to just maintain, and I just go maybe 5% over that, and that allows me to just barely grow. And I found that that's just the best way for my body to grow muscle, but still stay somewhat lean throughout the process. And that's just pleasing me quite a lot. I like the way that these results are happening, and also keeps me mentally very, very sharp. I feel very energetic all the time, and yeah, I love where my body's at right now.
Okay. And on the days that you do work out, morning or afternoon or evening, or is it just whenever? And what days do you choose to work out?
Yeah, I used to actually work out in the mornings, and then I finally realized that your body, or at least my body, has a lot more energy for workouts when I do them in the afternoon. And I think that's kind of critical. Like the amount of energy you have before your workout is crucial to how much effort you're going to actually put into your and intensity you're going to put into your workout. And so I work out in the afternoons, like about 4 or 5 p.m. in the afternoon after I've already had three of my meals. And right before I work out, I eat a bunch of very high GI carbs, basically just carbs that will, it's almost instantly get into your bloodstream. So like oatmeal and chocolate and other types of just super fast carbs like that. And then I also have a caffeine free coffee substitute type drink. It's basically just adaptogenic herbs like reishi and things like that, and so this that gives me an energy boost. I have this super carb fueled and energy boosted state of body, and I go into my workout and just hit it as hard as I can. And right after that, I have a big old protein shake and a shower and things like that. And that process has worked very very well for me.
Okay. And going extended onto that, what does a typical day and week look like for Nathaniel?
Yeah, a typical day is well, I wake up around 8 a.m. or so, and I make some breakfast, or I basically just put my breakfast in the oven, and 10 minutes later, I'm eating my breakfast while I'm coding. So I start coding, and or sometimes I'll check Twitter and focus on that a little bit first, but I like to jump straight into whatever I'm doing at that point, and that's highly variable depending on where my video game's at. Um, but yeah, I go into sort of a state where I'm working for 30 minutes and then taking a 10-minute break and working for another 30 minutes and taking a 10-minute break and so on throughout the whole day. And some of those work sessions I'll have a meal with, and I eat about 5 meals a day. And just basically just going from one state to another, flowing through my work list. Sometimes I don't like to focus too much on my work list. Sometimes I like to just develop, like I like to call it developing from the heart. I'm just focused on whatever excites me most in that moment, because I find that um, focusing on the fun and the excitement of game development tends to tends to make the funnest video game for me. It seems like whenever I'm in a fun state, I create a fun video game, and that matters most to me in game development right now. So that's kind of what it is. I just focus on the fun mostly, and get on with making my video game. I also have a list of to do things. It's like hundreds and hundreds of items long, and
Don't
and
we all?
never ever seem to quite get to the end of it, but I also recognize that I'm in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. I know I'm doing exactly the right thing. I'm always on time. It's just that I have this vision of the future. I can see hundreds of things into the future of what needs to be done. It's just that I'm focused on whatever is most important in the moment. So that's kind of how my development works.
Okay. And how do you cope, and what advice would you give to others when, let's say, you get to the end of the day or end of a development session, because you're gonna have to rest, you're gonna have to sleep, you're gonna have to, shut off, even if it's just for a few hours or a night, and you haven't done what you wanted to do at the start of the day, or there's some problem, and like, how do you cope with that? What advice would you give to others?
Yeah, I would say you need to reform your belief systems. Basically, you if you start your day with an expectation to get a certain amount of things done, you're already off to a bad start. Really. So you need to change up the way you believe about what you do and what your work system. The way I like to do it is to just accept whatever comes, because sometimes you have days where you're working on one thing the entire day, and if you had set this goal like, oh, I need to get 10 things done, you're only setting yourself up for failure. You're never going to get those 10 things done. You're maybe going to get that one thing done. And so I don't like to create expectations whatsoever in my days. I like to accept whatever comes, whatever I get done is exactly what needed to get done. And that sort of belief system allows me to end every single day feeling good about what I did. And I know what you mean, because I used to be that way as well. I used to always set so many goals for the day, like, oh, I hope I get 10 things done today, and I need to get 20 things done tomorrow, and all that. But I never ever felt good about what I did, and it's a horrible way to live. It's a horrible way to develop. So yeah, I would encourage you to completely revamp your belief systems about work.
Okay, I mean that's definitely something I know I need to take on board because there's so many times where I'll have a list of tasks and I'm like, yeah, I can get these done today, and then let's say halfway through the day, I'm like, oh, I'm just still on the first or second one, and I've got like 10, 20 tasks, and I can already see that it's not gonna, I'm not gonna finish all the tasks, and you get that feeling where you just like you said, you've set yourself up for failure because you had these expectations, but then likewise there's times where I finish all the tasks, but it's not the end of the day and there's still loads of time left. And I'm like, if I don't do anything, I'm going to feel like a failure almost because I haven't, used that extra time to have. If I do something, I'm gonna be like, should I have rested or did I not spend enough time on those other tasks? I think one thing, like one takeaway from what you were saying for me is try and focus on the time you put it in, and if you put that time in and you concentrate. So let's say if your task is to put an hour of time in and you focus, you get that hour of time in, that's, a step towards your goal. But then even going further, I would say is be open to the possibility of things coming up, especially if you've got family, especially if you've got commitments, whatever it is, things are going to come up and you might only be able to do 45 minutes. But if you know that you did those 45 minutes and that other, let's say 15 minutes wasn't because you were scrolling endlessly on YouTube or TikTok, it was because something actually came up and it was out of your control. I think that would be a good way of measuring, okay, that was a good day. I mean, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, that's one way to do it.
Yeah. Okay, and how's your social life as a result of being a full-time indie? I personally know projects like this can, take a toll.
Yeah, during Songbringer days, like I was saying, I worked 7 days a week, and I'll never do that again. And that completely, it really, uh, I didn't have a social life at all. And I mean, I did have a social life, but it just didn't, was barely spending any time on it at all. And now things with Wraithbinder are much, much more healthy. I work 5 days a week. Um, very solidly, very, very focused and intense. But those 2 days off per week, to allow myself to do anything, to socialize, to go out, to meet people, to spend time with existing friends, to go visit my family, to have family up and visit me. Like there's a lot of time during those 2 days where I can do whatever I want there socially. And sometimes I'll take a good hour or 2 or 3 hours off during the week for a friend's event in the evening or something like that, just to connect with someone. So I have a very much more healthy social life at this point, and that is very, very fulfilling in life. And I think it's critical to at least my sense of well-being. And yeah, so for now, I'm on a very, very good, healthy path, and I like what I'm doing here.
Okay, and talking about timing and that, how what's the process with Double 11 in terms of how often do you check in with them? And like, do they have a system of where they're tracking the amount of work you're doing, the amount of lines of code, the amount of hours you're putting in, or is it a pretty flexible arrangement?
It's a fairly flexible arrangement. Um, we have a good amount of trust that we've built up. Now, we've already worked on one entire project together, Songbringer,
Hmm.
for years now. So, gosh, I mean, I met them in 2015, so it's the 7 years now we've been working together, and so that's a lot of trust that's already built up. And so right now with Wraithbinder, we have like at least every month we have a check-in, a phone call. I have an amazing producer, and we check in every single month, and we have a good chat about how things are going. That's at least. sometimes we have more meetings to discuss marketing and other types of things. So yeah, it's a pretty flexible arrangement at this point, and then we talk at least once a month, and we talk a lot more, um, through email and Twitter and things like that. But we have at least one like video call per month.
Okay, that's good. And what version of C++ are you using in Wraithbinder, and what do you use in Songbringer?
I'm currently using C++ 17 um, with Wraithbinder, and I think I used C++ 14 with Songbringer. And I will say that I really don't use too many of the newer 14 and 17 features of C++, but I do use a lot of the C++ 11 features. So I could probably get away with just using C++ 11. And those are, like the auto keyword is very important. Lambdas are very important. Other types of C++ 11 features. But yeah, I'm not really aware of some of the newer features, even in C++ 17 and the newer one that's coming out now. So
Okay.
yeah, that's where it's at with C++.
Okay, so what's your, logic, your reasoning behind not using newer features from 14 and 17, using, I guess you wouldn't call it C++ 11 core features, but it's been around for so long and it's so prevalent, it's almost like core features now.
Yeah, it's really just that I'm not so much aware of them anymore. I found that, when it came to C++ 14 and 17, there just weren't, I would, when they would came out, I would look at, these lists of features, and most of them are things I just wouldn't use as a developer. They're not, uh, yeah, I just basically kind of ignored them.
Okay, I mean, that's fair enough. So you journaled your progress on Songbringer on YouTube. How did that come about, and what gave you the motivation to keep those logs going for that whole process? Because I know for currently Wraithbinder, you're doing shorter vlogs, and we'll talk about that in a second. For Songbringer, you was doing multi-hour long vlogs on a daily basis. So what gave you that motivation when that was not your main thing? Because you wasn't a YouTuber per se, and your main focus was the game. So, like, ha, what gave you the motivation, and how did that come about? What made you want to do that?
Well, when I started Songbringer, I was investigating different social media platforms that I could use to promote my video game. And learned from my video game that had failed before that you need to do your own marketing. You need to do marketing on a regular basis too. And so just explored different platforms. I tried, Facebook and Twitter and Twitch, and I really loved Twitch a lot. I was like, I really like streaming. I like live streaming, and I can see myself doing game development this way. I like people. I like interacting with people, and Twitch is a live platform where you're streaming and people can comment and chat with you. And so I did. Yeah, I did a whole bunch of live streams for Songbringer, 5 to 7 days a week of live streaming, and that built up a pretty good following. So the game, started out. I would do my live streams, and no one would chat. No one would really be watching. But after a few months, there's people watching it. Started building up a regular following of people, uh, following the game's progress on Twitch and Twitter and things like that. So that was a good way to build a following. And that's kind of how what made the Kickstarter a success is that I had started building a following already, and I had a following that I could bring to the Kickstarter. And so that turned out to be a great way to keep touch with people and to build trust with people as well. And I still do that to this day. So with Wraithbinder, I do a live stream every single week, at least one a week. And I do on Wednesdays. I have a regular day and time where I do my live stream, and that whole thing is creates a VOD, a video on demand on Twitch that you can watch, and then I take those and I edit them down into a shorter, like 10 to 15 minute piece, which I upload to YouTube. And so it's kind of like a highlights. I almost do like a highlights video right now on YouTube, and then I make an even shorter form version of that, like it's about a minute long, which I could put up on Twitter, and then I make an even shorter version, like 15 to 30 seconds, I could put on TikTok. So there's a lot of promotion that I do on a regular basis. I'd say probably 20% of my time is spent on marketing every single week, and that's not very much time, and it's not going to create that much success as you. Um, but yeah, when you spend a lot more time, like on with Songbringer days, I did 5 of those a week, and that created a lot more success as far as marketing goes. But I've learned what's important and what's not important. And right now, today in video games, what's important for marketing is creating wish lists. So
Hmm.
the way to do that is mostly through online game festivals. And so social media is important, and it's a thing I put it's a regular amount of time into. But the really important thing is creating an awesome video game and putting it into online festivals and getting as many wish lists as possible.
Okay. And when is Wraithbinder coming out?
Um, that's kind of we have a variable sort of flexible window at this point, and so it could happen as early as March of 2023. And this is for the early access version, and
Okay.
it might be later than that, but we'll see. It kind of depends on how many wish lists we can develop along the way. So yeah, it's a flexible sort of launch window, and it will go through several phases. So there'll be the early access phase, where it's going to be only on PC and on PCs at first, and then it'll get more and more mature, and we'll do like a 1.0 launch, and probably some console versions. I have no idea what to say there. It's all kind of in the future. So at this point, all I can tell you is that there'll definitely be an early access launch, and it'll probably be sometime in 2023.
Okay, that's cool. And how does Wraithbinder link to Songbringer, and what are the main differences? Because it's not technically a Songbringer 2, is it?
No, it's not Songbringer 2, and in fact, in the future, I do plan on making Songbringer 2, and hopefully a Songbringer 3. But for now, Wraithbinder is sort of a multiplayer take on the Songbringer universe, and it is more of a Songbringer was more of a story-focused game. So there's a story that you're playing through, but Wraithfinder is more of a replayable game. So it has a lot of more roguelike elements and Metroidvania elements that you. So it kind of really mixes things up and really plays to the randomness and the new fresh experience that you can experience with Wraithfinder every time you play it. So Wraithfinder is a game where it's kind of like it's a top-down pixel art, but it's three-dimensional pixel art. So you can rotate the camera and see your pixels from all different angles. It's basically just a voxel engine with pixel-sized voxels, and that is in the kind of it's almost like a Zelda game in the sense that it has swords and bombs and secrets and things like that. But it's more of a roguelike game in the sense that you're um, every time you play it, it's a different generated world, and when you die, you start over back at the beginning, and you lose some gold and light, but you get to keep a whole bunch of things like your armor and the progress you made in buffing up your stats and things like that. So it's more of a roguelite game technically than a roguelike game. But it also has Metroidvania elements. So it's kind of a unique blend of roguelike and Metroidvania in the sense that it has a whole bunch of abilities that you gain throughout your run. So you start off your run and you have no abilities at all. You gain your first weapon, which might be a bow, it might be a boomerang, it might be a sword, or it might be an axe, and then each dungeon throughout your run, you're gaining another ability, and each one of your abilities allows you to progress further into the world by crossing over what's called like a gate block or some type of block or obstacle in the world which requires that ability or that item to cross it. So, for example, um, the the sword allows you to chop through any type of breakable object like a jar or a pillar, and that that allows you to progress further in the world. So if you find these jars or pillars, you can chop it down with your sword and get past it. And so that's gated progression, and that's kind of one of the core mechanics of the Metroidvania game. And so yeah, Wraithbinder is basically just combining those two big genre elements, the roguelike randomness and permadeath with the Metroidvania gated progression.
Okay, and are you gonna have some sort of feature for Songbringer players to port over saves or something to reward them?
No, not at all.
No, no, no. Okay, and for Wraithbinder, because you was talking about you get a random level every time you play. So does that mean you can't put a seed in like Songbringer?
Right. Yeah. So Wraithbinder is a different seed every time, and that's and maybe I'll create a feature where you can actually play the same seed twice. We'll see. But the point of that is to create a fresh experience for the player every single time you play it, and that makes the game more streamable. So for streamers, you know, you're playing a game, you want it to be different every time, or to have some kind of new experience, and also just makes it more fun for players in the sense that you get this sort of random element to it. Like, what's the world going to be like this time? What abilities am I going to get? What order am I going to get my abilities in? How is this run going to play out? What relics am I going to get in this world to power me up?
Okay, and why did you choose to do Wraithbinder instead of going directly to Songbringer 2, 3, and so forth?
Songbringer is a like I said, a story-based video game, and
Hmm.
so there's something there which I thought that would like a fine wine, how it tends to age better, you know, as time progresses, it ages and it becomes an even better tasting wine. I think that allowing some time for my ideas to really form and have some time to just uh, grow better with age. So basically, it just allows me to have some time to think about the ideas I want to put into the story for Songbringer 2, and also the game elements and how I want the Songbringer 2 to play out. So it's a nice thing to have a break as far as that goes for allowing the game to just become better. And yeah, and also Wraithbinder is a way to incorporate some different kind of multiplayer elements and things like that that I wouldn't normally put into a Songbringer game, and do that in a unique way and make it its own game, its own product.
Okay, and you touched on Songbringer 2 and Wraithbinder. We're looking at an early access possibly in 2023 and then maybe a launch in 2024. So when could we expect Songbringer 2 and 3? I know it's a while away, but do you have any dates in mind?
No, I don't. I don't have any dates at
Yeah,
this point. And once again,
no
that goes
date.
back to my mindset of not creating expectations. I don't want to ever set any kind of expectation where, oh, I want to do Songbringer 2 in 2025 or whatever. That's just
Mhm.
setting myself up for failure and disappointments. Because I'll accept whatever comes. I'll never know when I'm even going to release Wraithbinder. It's such a flexible thing making video games. You always think you're going to be here at this point, but you never really are. It's always things take longer than you think, and so I find that it's best to have an open and accepting attitude about whatever comes, and to work as fast as I can and just celebrate whatever I get done every single day.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good way. Obviously, we was talking about it earlier, and I remember you were saying before the podcast you had to run after an hour. Is that still the case, Nathaniel? For I'll check it because it's been about an hour now. Don't want to take more time than you have today.
Yes, yes, it is. I do have to get back to work.
Yes, okay, that's not a problem then. Okay, there's one last question and then we'll wrap up. And so the last question is what advice would you give as a developer?
In general?
Yeah, just like whatever advice would you give to a developer? Like, what would be your best advice? And especially, let's say, an indie developer that's at their earlier stages.
Yeah. My advice would be to follow your heart, and um, that sounds cliche, but really, your heart is a very intelligent thing. We're coming out. There's a whole bunch of scientific evidence um, that points to the fact that your heart actually has its own. Um, it actually has its own brain matter. They're called ganglia, which I think are just means neurons that are external to the brain. But your heart actually has its own brain matter surrounding it, and your heart generates an electromagnetic field, which is something like 100 times stronger than your brain's electromagnetic field. Your heart has a whole bunch of um, tricky things up its sleeve that make it a very powerful thing. And so, don't, I would say, first of all, don't underestimate the power of your heart. Follow it, learn how to follow it, and learn what it is that you really want in life. And secondly, to just believe in yourself. I've had so many situations where I didn't believe in myself, and if I had just believed in myself back in the past, maybe I would have been here sooner. So if you can do whatever you want in life, you can become a programmer, you can become an artist, you can become a musician, you can become all three. You can do whatever you want in life, and you're more powerful than you can possibly imagine, you know? So so just allow yourself to believe in yourself, to believe that it's possible and that you can really do anything you set your mind to because it's true. You can.
I mean, for sure, be committed, take each day as it comes, and just enjoy the journey. Okay, and so that's it. I also want to thank you, Nathaniel, for coming on. I look forward to Wraithbinder coming out and playing that hopefully early next year. Have you, you know, would you be happy to do like a giveaway to the audience?
Yes.
Okay, and can we do some sort of giveaway for Songbringer, perhaps? And then obviously, because Wraithbinders in the future, we can obviously do another podcast in the future, maybe do something for that. Because that's still your current main game that's available right now, isn't it? Songbringer.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that sounds good. Obviously, we'll hash out the details afterwards. But if you want to be in a chance for winning, Songbringer for obviously for free, because there's obviously you're winning it, then just leave a 5-star review on whatever platform you're on, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, whatever it is. And that's it. So I really want to thank you, Nathaniel, for coming on. Appreciate you, spending your time, and hopefully you have, a good. Actually, what time is it where you are right now?
Uh, I don't know. Yeah, 9-ish, 10-ish, something like that.
In the morning.
Yeah.
In the morning. Okay, so hopefully you have a good day because obviously for me it's almost 6:30 in the evening. So obviously my day will be wrapping up in a few hours, but for you it's just beginning. So I appreciate you basically waking up and jumping on the podcast for me. So thank you very much, and we'll talk soon, Nathaniel. Take
All
care.
right. Yeah, Fred. Great talking with you.
Take care. Bye.
Mhm.